We usually think of Alan Turing as the person who kick-started the computer revolution. We're going to look at that in this video.
If you speak a word of what I'm about to show you, you will be executed for high treason.
It's beautiful. It's the greatest encryption device in history, and the Germans use it for all communications.
Everyone thinks Enigma is unbreakable.
Let me try, and we'll know for sure.
That's Alan Turing, as he was portrayed in The Imitation Game. He was a big hero during World War II. Turing saw what the Nazis were doing to his country, so he got involved over at Bletchley Park, where they were trying to decipher the codes the Nazis were using to talk to their U-boats. His knowledge of cryptography was the key to breaking that code. Alan Turing was very smart, that's for sure. But you see this pin here? We're going to poke a hole or two into Turing mania. Turing really did lead the team of codebreakers at Bletchley. That part's true. He saved millions of lives, and that's not all. At King's College, he wrote a paper about a universal machine in which he proves it's actually possible to make one device that can figure out your bank account, or solve equations, or process text, etc. It's a universal machine. We call those things computers now. And later on, he worked with some other guys, most prominently John von Neumann, to make real-life working computers. So there's no question Alan Turing was a pioneer. But if Alan Turing was the father of computers, who was Charles Babbage? Who was Ada Lovelace? What about Sergei Lebedev? With just 12 engineers, Lebedev produced a computer in the Soviet Union in 1951, just as UNIVAC 1 was emerging. And before all that, there's the Greek Antikythera mechanism, and then before that, there's the abacus of the ancient Sumerians. So is Turing worship sucking all the oxygen out of the computer room? Stand by. Well, talk about being born before his time. You can make a heck of a case for Charles Babbage as father of the computer. Babbage was born in 1791. He was a mathematician and an engineer and a philosopher. Babbage was into cryptography just like Turing. In fact, Babbage and Turing would have made quite a team over there at Bletchley Park if Babbage had been alive when Turing was. And guess what? Not everyone says Turing is the father of the computer. Babbage has his fans. They say he's the father of the computer. Lebedev's fans are probably in Russia, but they're probably not voting for Turing either. So let's see if we can sort this out. First of all, the abacus was an aid for counting. The Antikythera was to keep track of heavenly bodies. Nobody thinks these things were really computers. Let's discuss Babbage, though. Before computers, people used tables to solve lots of problems. Babbage was using astronomical tables, but the tables were kind of driving him nuts. They were full of errors. So at some point, Babbage goes, I wish to God these tables had been executed by steam. How could steam make tables? Leave it to Babbage. Babbage, who invented the modern postal system, the ophthalmoscope, the computer printer, the car dynamometer, the cow catcher, that thing in front of trains that pushes cows out of the way. Babbage, who sort of founded the Royal Astronomical Society. Babbage, who was in charge of the Survey of Ireland. Babbage, who was a professor at Cambridge. I'm sure I'm forgetting a pile of other things. Laid out a design for a mechanically driven system he called a difference engine, as well as a successor device he called an analytical engine. Babbage's analytical engine used punch cards for input. It was the first true general computer. It was Turing complete because it had all the stuff you need to be a real computer. Working with Babbage to popularize the machine, or maybe I should say non-machine, since while the part that got done could be hand-cranked, the full machine wouldn't be completed for over a century, and obviously not by Babbage himself. But working with him was Ada Lovelace, his colleague, and I guess you could say co-conspirator, who came up with algorithms for looping and conditional branching. That Babbage-Lovelace story is really interesting, and I'll pick up on it in some depth in another video in this series, the one I call The Cat Ate Their Homework, Babbage and Lovelace. But Ada wasn't just a pretty face. A computer without looping and branching is just a dumb calculator. So Ada's right up there with Charles on my funny little list. But does this face belong on a list of fathers of computing? How about we change the list to kickstarters of the computer revolution? Now, the last entrant on my list is Sergei Lebedev. This handsome fellow was stranded in the Soviet Union while all the fun stuff was going on in the West. Lebedev was designing his MESM machine in the late 1940s with a very small team and very limited resources. By 1951, it was lit up and working, but sorry, Sergei, he was scooped by UNIVAC, which was operational in 1944. So no list for you, Sergei. Maybe you can get on a list in Russia, though. All right, so what's left on our list now? We've still got Alan Turing, but he's sharing the bench with Charles Babbage and Lady Lovelace. You know, I'm having trouble with this one. It's a hard choice. Turing, working in tough personal circumstances, saved lives and had such a clear vision of modern computing that his views of thinking machines are fresh even today as we struggle with AI. But Babbage was no slouch. Born before the age of electric circuits, he was undaunted by the challenges of making a hand-cranked or steam-driven bunch of cogs and gears. As crazy as it sounds, it actually worked. If the British government hadn't given up on him, he'd have achieved his dream of mechanically created tables of logarithms, astronomical bodies, and such. You know, maybe Ada Lovelace is my favorite. Her father, Lord Byron, never even checked in with her. He left her to her mother to raise. Women were not taken too seriously back then, but Lovelace, in spite of all the extra stuff she was expected to do as a woman, what's new, right? Got herself up to speed on the mathematics of her time, thought deeply about the problems of her day, and managed to ingratiate herself with the very exciting Babbage and his work on calculating engines. Without Ada, Babbage would be known for his ideas about how labor could be divided between skilled and unskilled scriveners who created tables of data. But his way too expensive calculators would have been forgotten. Okay, I guess I've kept you in suspense long enough. Who wins the contest? Who takes a bow for the mother or father of computing? Have you ever heard the phrase, success has 1,000 fathers, but failure is an orphan? Well, I guess I have to go with that. Like so much in this modern world, it's really hard to give full credit to just one person for an important invention. My little list has Alan Turing and Ada Lovelace and Charles Babbage. There's even room for Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Tom Watson Jr., and Ken Olsen. There is plenty of credit to go around, and I'll get to all those fathers and mothers later on in this series about computers. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time.